Within this tutorial, we're going to dive deep into creating our own textures, our own materials, custom mesh, as well as a verse device to create the game mechanic that you see on screen, where the player can attack a trigger and the progress mesh base device will update accordingly. So let's go ahead and start with the texture first, as it's going to be the most simple. So Control N, let's go ahead and create a new document here. And what I would like to do is make sure that this is a perfect square, make things a lot easier in the long run. And if it's a 512 by 512, we can always reduce this and it won't look terrible. With that all set up, we'll go ahead and say create. Inside of here, I'm going to go ahead and change this background so that I can actually work out with it by clicking on the little lock button right there. Let's go ahead and add in a new layer, and this is where we're going to be painting. So on this new layer, I'm going to go ahead and use just the circle marquee tool. And to get the dead center on this, I'm going to go ahead and grab from the ruler and drag over here, and it should snap by default. I'm going to do this down here as well. So now I can find the center. So if I click and drag and then hold down Alt afterwards, you can see it'll actually expand from the center. And if I hold Shift, I get a perfect circle. So something about like this. Now, this first one we're going to use as the alpha. So let's go up here into our channels and go ahead and click on this button right here. And I'll go ahead and create an alpha of that circle. Let's go back into our layers and make sure that we actually have our layer selected here. Next, we're going to go ahead and add in another circle. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key so that I can actually subtract from this circle that we have right here. Click and drag. I'm going to let go of Alt and then hold Alt again so we get that expansion from the center. And if I hold down Shift, now we can get a nice ring like so. Now with layer 1 selected and the foreground color as black, if I hold down Alt and hit backspace, it'll just fill it in, which is nice. So let's go ahead and deselect that. And now what I want to do is create the little marks right here where we're going to see our little tick marks like that. So to do that, let's grab our brush, and this size brush is actually going to work really well. So if I click and drag and hold Shift, I can actually ensure that I'm going to be right on that line, and I'll do this one here as well. So click and drag like this. Now I don't want all of this in here, so let's go back to the marquee tool. I'm going to click and drag again, hold down Alt and Shift to get a perfect circle. So that section right there. And with this part selected, I can just hit delete and deselect all that. And now we have our little dial. Now, the other thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that this area is actually dark black, and we're going to use a target, which is going to reduce any chance of actually getting a halo of white around the outside edges of this. So if we go back into our channels, and if we select this one and then click our little button right here, you'll notice it will actually select that specific area. So this area right here. Now I want to go ahead and fill in the outside area with black, so I need to invert that. So Control Shift I will invert it. And again, if I hold Alt and hit backspace, we can go ahead and fill that in. Let's deselect that, and we see a little bit of a halo on there. That's easy enough to fix. We can actually take our brush, and if we make our brush a little bit bigger here, we can actually just fill that little spot in like so. And now we can guarantee we won't get a halo on our texture, regardless of what it actually does when it MIPS. So now what we want to do is we want to turn this into a targa so that we can use it in the engine. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Shift and S to go ahead and save this out, save this on my computer, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we set this as a targa down here. And I'm going to go ahead and just drop this on the desktop to keep it nice and organized. Let's go ahead and just create a folder to keep all these pieces in here. Open that one up, and we're going to call this targa T_dial and background, and we'll call this demo as well. Now the other thing I want to point out is that we are going to be saving our alphas. So make sure that this one is toggled on. We'll go ahead and say save. And again, we want to make sure that for those that are taking notes, this is set to 32 bits. It'll be a bit more expensive in the engine, but as long as we're not abusing this, this will work really well. So go ahead and say OK on that one. Now that we have this set up, we need to go ahead and build the little dial piece that is actually going to point in one direction or the other. So to do that, let's go ahead and create a new layer over here. And inside of here, let's go ahead and use our marquee tool again. And again, we'll click and drag and hold Alt and Shift and get a nice round area. And now I'm going to change over to the lasso tool, specifically the polygon lasso tool. And if I click while holding Shift, we can add to this. I'm going to get right on the edge here, and we're going to come all the way up. And you'll notice that it snaps to this edge, which is perfect. Now I'm going to make this longer than we need. And the reason for this is that when we're modeling out the piece that we're going to be putting this on, we're going to shrink its size on the polygon. So let's make it a little bit bigger than we want. So for sure, let's go right to the edge of this, and then I'll come back down here and click again, and then double click right in this area, and that completes it. And let's give it a really bright color. So something like a bright purple. That'll work. And again, with this part selected and purple is my foreground, I'll hold Alt, backspace, and just fill it in. Now, we want to create an alpha for this. So with this part selected, we'll go back to our channels and delete this alpha. Go ahead and add in a new one like so, and then deselect. Now, what I'm going to go ahead and do is fill this whole thing in with purple like that. Now, this is going to seem strange, but it's going to work in the long run because we have that alpha in here, and we'll see that when we get into the engine. So let's go ahead and save this. Let's go ahead and save it on the computer, and let's make sure that this also is a target. And we don't want this demo in here for the, or sorry, we don't want the background on the end of this, just like that. And let's go ahead and change that 0 to an O. Nice little slip of the fingers there. And we'll go ahead and save that. And again, make sure that it's set to 32-bit. We'll say, okay. All right, let's go ahead and take all of this stuff over to the engine and start working with it over there. So let's open up our content drawer, and you'll see I do have an actual folder for this to keep it nice and organized. And we'll just right click and come up here where it says import. Go to the folder that this is actually inside of, and you'll see that we have 2 files here. We're going to just select those. We're going to open those ones up. And if you'll look at these, you'll notice that we don't have that alpha thing that I was talking about. However, if we open one of these up, and let's go ahead and turn off our red, our green, and our blue, you can see that we do actually have that alpha. And you'll notice that with these on, this is what this texture is going to look like. And no matter what size this is, you will never get a little halo around the outside edge because the edge of this dial is black and everything behind it is black. Cool little trick that we actually have inside of here. You'll also notice that we do have MIPS as well, so that's also a plus, and everything is nice and square, and we're not getting any errors. So huge, huge plus for paying attention to what we're doing prior to bringing it into the engine, which is going to save us a lot of time, effort, and energy in the long run when everything is set up properly. So let's make sure that we save all of that. Now we're going to go ahead and create the actual mesh as well as start the materials. So to do that, we're going to go from selection mode and we're going to go into our modeling mode. Inside of here, we'll make sure we're inside of create and go ahead and choose our rectangle. Now inside of here, we'll make a few changes. Under our output type, let's change from static mesh to dynamic mesh. Now the reason that we're doing this is we're going to be doing quite a bit of manipulating, and I don't want a static mesh clogging up anything inside my content drawer until I absolutely need it. So using a dynamic mesh is going to be really helpful for the moment. Next, we're going to go ahead and change our width to 200 by 200. This is totally up to you, but this will be big enough that we'll be able to see it on screen. Well, if we go ahead and click over here and then drag it up so we can see it, let's go ahead and rotate it so it's actually facing us. And because I've already prepped this tutorial, I know that we need to turn it 90 degrees counterclockwise on screen. This way, that way it'll be right side up. So as far as the materials, let's go into our content drawer and grab our texture here. I'll click and drag this onto the mesh like so. And you'll see because it's a target, it already knows to add that translucency in the material. So we don't have to do that, which is super helpful. However, we do want to go ahead and rename the material because this is a very silly name for what it is. All right, so next we're going to go ahead and just choose accept down here at the bottom. So this will solidify this one. And you'll notice inside of the outliner that this is actually a dynamic mesh. Next, let's go ahead and create the little piece we're going to need for the dial part. So zoom in on a little bit. I'm going to hold down Alt, click and drag, and just pull this forward and change over to my scale tool. I'm going to hold Control, and anywhere where I'm not on top of the gizmo, while I'm holding Control, I can left mouse click and drag and actually change the size of this. So let's go ahead and add on the other texture here. So let's go ahead and grab the little dial part and drag that on there and let go. And it should be facing directly up, which is exactly what we want. If it's not, go ahead and just rotate it so that it actually is. All right, so now if I go ahead and push this back so it's real close but not right on top of it, that'll work really well. Okay, now we need to combine these two pieces together. So let's go ahead and select the dial background and then control click the actual dial piece. We can come over into our modeling tools. Specifically, we're going to go into Xform. Now, inside of Xform, we have a merge up here. So let's go ahead and just click on this. And we want to create a new object. And we're going to go ahead and give it a new name. So we'll call this one S_dial and demo, like so. And I want to put this back into the folder in which all those other pieces are. So down here under new asset path, we're going to go ahead and change this. And we're going to go ahead and set it to our dial demo folder. So everything's in the same spot. And just go ahead and choose OK. Now we go ahead and click on our accept. And you'll notice we now have one piece in here that is a dynamic mesh. And we want to actually make this something we can work with. So we have to convert it into a static mesh. So now that this is all set up, we can come up here again underneath Xform. Come up here to where it says convert. We're going to go ahead and set our output type to static mesh. We're going to go ahead and transfer materials and collision, even though we don't actually have any of those collision bits. And this is where this is going to be going. Remember that we just set this up a second ago, and we'll go ahead and say accept. So now if we go into the content drawer, we should now see our actual static mesh. Again, it gave it a silly name because that's just what it's doing. And we'll go ahead and leave it like that. And then we'll go ahead and make sure that everything is saved. All right, so save all that. Now, just to double check that this is working like I want, this one right here is a static mesh. I'm going to delete it, and then I'm going to go ahead and grab this one and drag it in like so. So perfect. This is doing exactly what we want it to do. Let's go ahead and leave modeling mode, go into selection mode, and we need to double check something as it's going to be important as we connect this to our mesh-based progress device. And we need to check how the materials are set up on this one. So with this one selected, I'm going to hit Control B as in beta, and we'll open up the browser, which is that one right there, and I can double click on it to open it up. So inside of here, you will notice that we have two things going on, our elements 0 and our element 1. So element 0 is the background, and element 1 is the actual dial. And we're going to need to know this kind of information as we connect it to the mesh-based progress device. So if yours is any different, just take note of it before we get to that section of our video. Before we move on though, let's make sure that we actually give our material a proper name. Now we need to go ahead and address the material so that it'll work with the actual progress-based mesh device. So let's go ahead and double click on it to open it up. And inside of here, I'm going to do a few things. One, let's go ahead and just change this so that it's a little plane so we can actually see what we're working with in here. And next we need to add in about 3 nodes. So the first one we're going to need is a custom rotator. So go ahead and right click, type in custom rotator. So this one right here. And this one is going to control the UVs. So we'll go ahead and connect this wire to our UVs. Next, we need to go ahead and control the texture coordinates. So if I hold down the U key and click, we get a texture coordinate. We go ahead and connect this one into our UVs like so. The next node that we need is the most important node, and it's a scalar parameter that is going to drive this dial to go around in a circle like so. So to get one of these, I'll just hold down the S key to left mouse click, and inside of here, we'll go ahead and rename this. Now, this is the most important part, so I'm going to zoom in on this and really make sure that you're all paying attention. This needs to be named very specifically. It needs to be one word, fill amount, and it must be F and A uppercase with no spaces. So if you're curious to where this is actually coming from, if we look on the documentation page underneath our progress-based mesh devices, go and click on UEFN right here. And underneath here, if we go down just a little bit further, you'll see this right here. So this is letting us know that we have to name this parameter very specifically. Otherwise, again, it won't actually interface with the device. So do not miss this section. All right, so let's go ahead and get this out of the way. So with this one, we're going to click and drag this one into our rotation angle. Now, there is one problem, at least for me, and if we select this one and we go ahead and change our default value here, and we go ahead and rotate it, you'll notice that it's going counterclockwise, which is not what we want. And you'll notice that up here in the corner, we're also getting a little artifact. So we need to address both of those issues. So let's change the rotation thing first. So the next node that I'm going to use is actually a way to inverse the direction that this is going. So if we right click and type in 1 minus, we'll find a 1 minus node. So we'll go ahead and use this one. We're going to go ahead and plug this one in between these like so. Now when we go ahead and select this and we change this, you'll see that it's actually going clockwise, which is what I want for mine. I'm going to go ahead and set this at a value of 0. Now to get rid of that other issue that we saw around the outside edges of the actual texture here on our polygon, we need to address the actual texture. So let's go back over to our texture node and we'll go ahead and open this one up, and we're going to go ahead and change the sampler source down to clamp like so. So now if we come back over here with this one selected, if we change this, you'll see that we don't actually have that issue of the texture showing up on the corners. So this is everything that we're going to need right here. I'll go ahead and set this up so that you can take a screenshot of it, or go ahead and just build everything that you see on screen like so. And we'll make sure that this one is also selected so you have all of the information for every node that you're going to need. All right, with this all set up, we go ahead and save this, and we'll go ahead and close that one down. Now we're going to go ahead and set up all of the devices. So we'll go to our content drawer, and inside of our devices folder, go ahead and just do a search for mesh to find our progress-based mesh device. So we'll go ahead and click and drag this one in like so. Let's go and lift it up off the ground. Now, the couple of things that we need to actually change in here instead of the details are actually way down here underneath our visuals. Now, we're not going to use the default stuff, so we'll go ahead and just click on the little trash can right here to remove all the elements, and then come down here and click on this Add Element button right here. And inside of this one, what we want to go ahead and do is change our static mesh to be that dial that we actually created. So we'll go ahead and click on the none right here, and if we search for dial, we'll find our S-dial demo. This is the one that we want to go ahead and use. So there it is. It's actually showing up. Now, the other thing that we want to go ahead and change is its fill material index. You'll notice right now it says -1, which isn't going to work. And if we go back to our static mesh, so if we come in here and let's go ahead and do inside of this one, and we want our static mesh. So this guy. So if we go ahead and double click and open it up, you'll notice that our element 0 is the background and their element 1 is the actual dial. So we want to go ahead and use element 1 in that little area on our details. So right here, so this fill material index, we want this one to be 1, like so. Next, let's go ahead and set up a way so we can actually test this. So inside of our content drawer, let's go ahead and grab a trigger device and just this one right here. Just click and drag this one in. I'll lift it up just a little bit so it'll be easier to hit. And inside of here, we want to go ahead and set it up so that we can damage it. We do not want to trigger it by the player, and we don't want to be able to trigger it with vehicles, sequences, or with the water. So the only way to actually get this to work is to actually hit it with something. And for this example, we'll go ahead and use the harvesting tool. So next, we can go ahead and set it up so that this will actually progress to make sure that this connection actually works. And we can do this real simply by going under our begin progression. Now, what we're going to do is show you what is going to be a problem for what we want to do and what we actually need to go ahead and fix. So go ahead and add in an array element on begin progression, and then go ahead and link it to the trigger that we just dropped in there. Underneath our none, we're going to set on triggered like so, and we can go ahead and test this in game. And what we're expecting to see is that when we whack this, it actually starts to progress. But this isn't what we want. We want it to progress just a little bit every time we hit it. And you'll notice if I hit it now, it's not going to actually do anything or reset. The other problem is that once it actually gets all the way around up to 1 as a value, we're not going to be able to continue this on. Like, it just won't reset. So we'll wait for this, and if I go ahead and hit it again, it doesn't do anything. So we need to fix this, and we're going to do that by writing out the verse code. So let's jump back over to the engine. And the first thing that we want to do is make sure that we don't have any bindings connected in here, because we're going to run all that through the verse code. So let's make sure that this is actually disconnected there. Now let's go ahead and actually create a verse device. So up here underneath verse, we're going to go ahead and open up our verse explorer, and I've got mine docked over here on the side, and up here at the very top, I'm going to right click, go ahead and say add new verse file to project. Now let's go ahead and give it a unique name. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and call it the progress material based device, and we'll go ahead and just click on the create. Now, as per usual, let's go ahead and get rid of anything that we don't need inside of here. A nice clean place to start, like so. Now we're going to need at least 3 editables. One of them is going to be for the dial, the other one's going to be for the trigger, and the last one is going to be a progression amount. And this last one is going to allow the designer to control how much they want the dial to move every time the player hits it. So let's go ahead and add in a couple of editables right here. So add editable. And this one is going to be our dial. This is going to be our progress-based mesh device. And the next one is going to be our trigger. And the last one is going to be the progression amount. And we'll go ahead and initialize it at 0.05. Now, the other thing that I want to go ahead and add in here is a tooltip for the designer in case they need to understand what this one is specifically doing. So we'll go ahead and add in a tooltip. And let's go ahead and just Double click that, and up here outside of the actual class, we're going to go ahead and put this up above. So we'll go ahead and paste that in there. We'll need to make sure that we localize this one. Like so. Here underneath the onBegin, let's go ahead and create an initialization function. This is going to set up our progress-based mesh device, and we can call it initDial. And let's go ahead and just create that function now. We're going to copy all of this, and come down here, and we'll go ahead and paste it, bring it back over. And inside of this, we are going to need to sleep. So let's add in our suspends. And inside of here, we'll go ahead and set the dial's current progress to 0. And remember, this does need to be a float value, so keep that in mind. Now, this is where we're going to go ahead and sleep for just a moment, and this is because we want to make sure that our dial is actually going to be initialized correctly. And I've found that if we go ahead and run these two sets right next to each other, it doesn't always work. So we'll go ahead and just make sure that we have a sleep between them. For the next set, we're going to make sure that the dial's progression target is 1.0. Just to keep everything between 0 and 1. And the last function we're going to need is to set it up so when the player actually hits the trigger, it'll actually progress our dial. So to do that, we'll create a function called progressDial. And because we're using a trigger and it might have an agent, we're going to need a maybe agent. And if our dial's current progress is less than 1, then we want to go ahead and add a little bit of progression to it every time the player hits it. So we can use a set to go ahead and grab the dial and get its current progress. And we're going to go ahead and add the progression amount, which we can go ahead and grab from up here. So we'll copy that and go ahead and paste that down there. We also need to set it up so that the dial will reset. And to do that, we need to check to see if we've actually hit that 1. Well, in our case, we're going to check to see if we hit that 0.99, which is close to 1. So we can say if our dial current progress is greater than or equal to 0.99, then we'll go ahead and reset the dial. And for this case, we can go ahead and use that initDial function that we created earlier. And because the initDial has a suspends specifier in it, we have to actually spawn this on a new thread. Now, just for debugging purposes, let's go ahead and add in a print string as well. So underneath the first if, let's go ahead and just drop this in here. So we can go ahead and say print. So inside of here, we'll add some quotation marks, and inside the quotation marks, we'll go ahead and add in a couple of curly brackets. We'll go ahead and look for the dial current progress. And finally, underneath our onBegin, let's not forget the actual subscription to when the trigger is actually hit. So we'll go ahead and grab our progress trigger and grab its triggered event, subscribe to it, and then go ahead and grab this function. So we'll copy that, paste that one in there. All right, let's go ahead and get rid of any excess lines that are in here. Try to get this all on screen, minus the libraries up at the top, so you have a chance to actually look over this and make sure you can double check your work. And of course, don't forget to save it, and we're going ahead and build it here. I'm going to hit Control-Shift-B because I've got that set up as a hotkey in there, and then let's go ahead and set everything up inside of the engine. And inside of the content drawer, if you don't actually see your device, just make sure you come up here and hit device, go ahead and build your verse code. That should make it show up. So down here in the content drawer, I have mine. So click and drag this one in. And we need to set this up so the dial, let's go ahead and use our little eyedropper and choose the dial that we're going to be working with. And the progress trigger, go ahead and use that one right there. And I'm going to go ahead and change this progress amount to be, let's say 0.2. That way we can kind of test to see if this works. And if we hover over here, we should get our little note that says use values between 0 and 1. So there we go. So let's go ahead and save all of that. And you may need to go ahead and push changes. I'm going to go ahead and do that just to double check that everything is going to go through. And then we'll go ahead and give it a test in game. So what we're expecting here in game is that when we hit the trigger, our dial will move 20%. And sure enough, it does. So if I hit it 5 times, it'll reset. And up in the top left-hand corner, we can see it how far it has actually progressed. So we'll get all the way back to 0. It'll reset. And now when I hit it again, it'll actually go all the way around. So cool. Everything is working exactly like we would expect it to. So there you have it. Now you know how to create a custom texture as well as a custom material that can be added to a custom mesh to be used inside of the progress-based mesh device. And this is all being driven inside of a custom verse device. And this really is just the beginning. As you can see here, this is all being driven by material information. There's actually no animation going on here at all whatsoever. So if you have any other questions, comments, concerns, or confusion you need cleared up so that you can continue to create, go and just leave a comment down below. We'll get back to you when we get a chance. And don't forget to be clever-like and subscribe.